Are you ready to persevere through your challenges? Let's do this. I want to introduce you to Paula Abbott. Welcome to the Perseverance Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I love that Texas accent. So you're originally from Lubbock, correct?
Yes, been a Texas girl my whole life.
So Paula, let's dive right into this. Tell us what happened when you were born. What was the situation in your life at that point?
Normally when somebody has a child, they're very excited about that child and they can't wait to bring the child into their life. Well, that wasn't the case with me. My birth mother didn't want to know me. She didn't want me. She rejected me immediately. So when she gave birth to me, she actually signed in under another woman's name, gave birth to me, and then gave me over to that lady, and that lady walked out with me. I was rejected before I was ever born.
Wow.
I would just say that if she ever knew how awesome I turned out to be, she would have never done that.
So this lady is not your mom. What was that journey like?
She was my mom for 6 whole months. Isn't that amazing? 6 whole months. I guess she got tired of being my mom, and she too rejected me. At the age of 6 months, I was abandoned in a house by myself. They found me, and when I turned 8 months old, I got adopted into a family.
Literally at the beginning of your life, not even 1 year old, being abandoned twice. At that age, you don't really understand what life is all about, but the torment that you had to go through, emotionally being abandoned through that process, that probably set up what the next couple of years were going to look like. So what was the challenge when you went into this new home at 8 months old, and what was that struggle that you were having there?
Rejection is a big part of pretty much all of our lives. At one point or time, we're going to feel rejection. When you feel rejection, you have this thing called approval addiction that sets up inside of you, that you seek to receive people's approval, and to get that approval, you'll do whatever it takes. At the age of 8 months old, I was adopted by a family, and this family was a very dysfunctional family. My mother wanted me. She was the one that wanted to adopt me, but my father did not. He was very abusive in every way. My adoptive father was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. We didn't go to church. We weren't allowed to talk about God or Jesus. It was forbidden in this household. A lot of abuse started happening very early in my life. My father was physically abusive, mentally abusive, emotionally abusive, but most of all, he was very, very verbally abusive. And verbal abuse is sometimes one of the worst abuses we can go through, because it's a pain that goes so deep inside that it lasts a lifetime. He spoke really negative things to me, told me I'd never amount to anything, I was never good enough. And already being rejected, you just have that feeling of unworthiness. At the age of 7 years old, I tried to commit suicide. I wanted to die at the age of 7. When you feel unworthy and you feel like you're not good enough, and that you're just a mistake and you really don't belong there, there's no other way to get out, and you feel like that's your only way.
Tell us about wanting your dad's approval.
I was so bad as far as approval addiction. I wanted my dad's approval so bad. I wanted to be the best little cowboy he would ever have. I mean, if he didn't want a girl, then I could be his cowboy. My father was a cattle rancher, and I could ride a horse. I could work the cattle better than anybody. So I tried so hard to make him love me, but he just didn't. And it became an addiction to me that I would do whatever it took. And then it actually even led into my school to get their attention, to do whatever I had to do to make people like me. And then whenever they reject you, it's 10 times harder than it would be just as regular rejection. I was around 6 years old when I was given this little pony. His name was Nubbins, and he was my best friend. And just saying that, horses have always been a part of my life, because what happens with a horse is that you can talk to them and they listen and they love. And I needed that relationship, even if it was with a horse. My father owned a horse race track. So we had that on our property, and we were always down there. And I wanted my horse to enter into the races because I just knew he was the fastest pony ever. And so they had a pony race, and my brother rode my pony in that race, and he won. And that was so important to me that day because that was my best friend, and my best friend just won first. And it showed my dad that maybe, hey, she is okay, and maybe she has something that is worth keeping.
So you're 16 years old, and the struggle that your mom had because your dad divorced her. Can you kind of tell us what that journey was like for you?
At the age of 16 years old, my mom and my dad had divorced. She had had all of the abuse that she wanted. She was done. She was broken, completely broken. Of course, my dad didn't want me. He didn't want anything to do with me. So I actually went and I lived with my mom. But I became a very rebellious teenager. And I believe it's everything that my dad spoke into my life. We just become what is spoken to us. Words are so very, very powerful. I started going to the nightclubs, and I was just looking for any kind of approval, any kind of acceptance. There was an older guy there. He was 19 years old, and he told me everything that I thought I wanted to hear. He was grooming me at the time, and I didn't realize that that's what he was doing. This can be for any young women out there today. When you're so needing people's approval and acceptance, you've got to be careful, and you've got to really make sure that the person that you're with is sincere. I believed everything that he told me that day because I wanted it so bad that I ended up going on a date with him, and I was raped. I was viciously raped at the age of 16. It's because I wanted his approval so bad. I wanted anybody's approval, and I let my guard down. I ended up pregnant from that rape. Then I was kicked out of school because you weren't allowed to go to school back then if you were pregnant. My mom didn't know what to do with me. She didn't know how to deal with a pregnant teenager. My abuser had threatened to kill my mother if I told her what happened. And so my mother actually signed me over to my abuser. I ended up having to marry him. So now I belong to him. And after a while, you just kind of feel like you're just handed over to the next person. So I'm 16 years old, I'm pregnant, and now I have to live with the abuser that raped me. And every day was a day of abuse. Every single day, I just had to learn to survive. I tried very hard to take care of her, but she was 2 years old, and he pulled a gun on us. He shot at us, and I just knew that my life was going to be done, so I had to give her up for an adoption to save her life. Of course, I took off. I got out of there as fast as I could, but I was broken. I was empty, and I was looking for the world to fill the void that was inside of me. The world's not a good place to look for things to help you.
It speaks to the pain that you had to go through, and you can't get rid of it.
When I left my abuser when I was about 19, I had 2 more children in my younger 20s, and I still wasn't happy, still was broken, still wasn't fulfilled, still hated life. So I ended up walking away from my 2 little boys. I went to Kansas City thinking that if I left Texas and if I go to a new state, that everything would be just fine, that I would just be new, nobody would know who I was. I ended up going to a nightclub, and I was asked to go to a party. Of course, I was there to meet people and to find people that would like me. It was a methamphetamine party. It became my everything. There's no hope. I became a hardcore meth addict. What methamphetamines did for me is it took away the pain. It numbed reality, but we all know that this is a fake reality. It's nothing real about it. But every time that the drug wore off, the pain would come back, the hurts would come back, the bondage would come back. And so I would have to look for the drug again. And so for 13 years, I was on this drug. I had no hope. I was completely broken. I had lost everything. I lost my children. I lost my family. I lost my job. I lost my home. I lived in the crack houses. I lived in anybody's house that would let me in. I lived on the streets, anywhere that I could find, because I lost everything. Everything I had, I carried in a black trash bag with me. That was my life. During this 13-year period, I ended up trying to commit suicide 2 more times. And it's not that I wanted to die. Nobody really wants to die. I just wanted the pain to stop. I had no hope. I had no dreams. I had nothing to hold on to. And so I just wanted it to be done. At the end, my last attempt at suicide, I was put into a mental hospital. I was locked up like an animal. And they actually took everything away from me. I had nothing. And they allowed me to have a couple of phone calls. And I called my mom. And I said, if you could get me out of here, then I promise I'll try to do better. And my mother told me probably the best word that I've ever heard in my life. And that was the word no. She says, I don't know what to do with you. I don't know how to help you. You need to get help. And so she left me there. That's something that I needed to hear, because if my mom would have given in to me, then they wouldn't have helped at all. I told them whatever they wanted to hear. I did the steps I was supposed to do, and I ended up getting out. But it was still very, very tough because I was still broken. I'm in Amarillo, Texas, and got back into the drug scene because it's a pit that I was familiar with. So I was driving to meet my drug dealer, and on the side of the road, I seen a sign that said Cowboy Church. I had never been to church before in my life. My dad always told me that it was crazy. Don't go in there. These people are crazy. They'll suck your brains out. They'll take all your money. You'll have to ride a bicycle, or you'll have to go to Africa. He planted these really crazy thoughts in my head about church, and I didn't want any part of the church, but the cowboy part. Now, see, I was raised on a ranch. I love cowboys. I thought they were amazing. And so God said, I'm going to use what I know that will bait her so that she can come in. I just need her to hear about my son, Jesus. So I pulled into that church parking lot, and I went in after the cowboys. I didn't go for anything else. I was already high on my drugs. I had already been drinking. I looked like a mess. I went in and I didn't get to meet a cowboy, but I did get to hear about Jesus Christ, the Son of God. The very first time in my whole life, I got to hear that this man died on a cross for me. Isn't that amazing? That he died on the cross for me, that he loved me, that he never would reject me. Everything I wanted to hear. But I did not give my life to Jesus that night because I didn't want to be a weird church person. But I got a seed planted in my heart, and seeds are so powerful. You may not see what happens to a seed. You just plant the seed, and God will take care of the rest. I was really careful about not going up to that altar because I knew that they would suck my brains out, take all my money, and then I'd have to go to Africa at some time. People tell me all the time that they are scared to go to church because sometimes we can paint church as being this holy, holy, holy person place. Said if you're broken or something, you can't come in. And that's just so not the way that we need to let people know about church.
That meth was calling your name again.
I struggled for 2 months. I had something called conviction, and I was being convicted. Now I'd heard about Jesus. Now I knew I was sinning. It was kind of crazy because I didn't know where this Jesus guy was. I didn't know if he was watching me, if he was around the corner, if he was sneaking up on me. So 2 months went by. I had OD'd again on methamphetamines, and I should be dead. That should have taken my life. But as I was laying in my deathbed, I laid there and I thought about it. I could call 911. They would come get me. They would put me back in the mental hospital. Or I could call on this Jesus that they told me that would help me and that would give me hope, that would change my life. And I screamed out the name of Jesus so loud that I'm sure the whole state of Texas heard. I didn't want to die. And I just said, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you can hear me, but I really, really need you in my life. And right then I surrendered everything to him. Everything that I had, I surrendered to Jesus. It was like I shouldn't have even been alive. I should not have even made it through the night. It's so amazing that when you call out his name, he hears you. He hears you, and he is right there to give you life.
When you accepted Christ, you got to learn about who the true Father was. Can you tell us what that experience was like?
I think one of my favorite verses is Jeremiah 1:5. He knew me when I was in my mother's womb, and he set me apart to be a prophet of the nations. God knew me when I was being formed in my mother's womb, and he did not reject me. He loved me. He knew everything about me. He knew everything that I was going to go through. And the Bible tells us is that he set us apart. So when he sets us apart, the world doesn't work. We can try to fill ourselves with the world and the meth or the drinking, but if God set you apart for a different purpose in life, none of this worked. And I fell so in love with Jesus. He is my everything. And I found that God is a good, good father and that he loves me even when I make mistakes. He's there when you need him. All you have to do is call upon him. The Bible tells us that he hears us when we call him and he answers us. It's not that he just hears us and ignores us. He hears us, he answers us, and he's there for us. And I have never had a father that loved me like God has loved me. He has turned my life around. I'm so excited about what God has done in my life. And as of this month, I am 25 years clean.
That is so awesome. Talk about that journey, because when you accept Christ, it's not all happy roses. You still have to deal with the drugs and the pain of the abandonment and all of that on earth. And how did God heal you?
I didn't get to 25 years unless I got through 2 days. I had to work this out. It's not like it just comes overnight and then poof, everything is okay and great. There's no perfect to life whatsoever. I had to work it. I had to get into God's word. I met my husband at that time and he started helping me. He went through a children's storybook Bible. When we talked about them, we read them. I learned about creation. I learned about Adam and Eve. I learned that even the most perfect people on the face of the earth made a mistake. They fell from grace. I learned that God loved them. He never turned his back on them. He was mad at them, but he never turned his back on them. This helped me to take a step every day, trusting in God, learning about God, but you have to read his word. You have to know who he is. And so I studied the word, and within maybe a month, I didn't want the drugs anymore. I didn't want the alcohol anymore. I didn't want to be in that kind of life anymore. I wanted more of Jesus. I received his forgiveness. It's a whole different thing, praying the prayer of salvation, but now you have to receive his forgiveness and say that, yes, I am worthy, that Jesus would die for me. I had to forgive myself, and that was probably one of the biggest things I ever had to do. The Lord just put it on my spirit that the rear view mirror in our car is such a small mirror. It's a glimpse of where we've been. It's not where we're going. But if we keep our eyes on the rear view mirror, we will crash. And we got to take our eyes off the past. We use it to help other people, but we move forward. We have hope in the future. Then I asked for forgiveness. I asked all three of my children to forgive me, and all three of them have forgiven me. They're back in my life, and I'm actually a Mimi of 10 amazing grandchildren. That can only happen by the grace of God. The final thing that I had to do in my restoration is I had to forgive. I had to forgive the woman who gave birth to me that didn't want me. I had to forgive her. I don't know what her reasons were, but I'm sure that she had some. I'm just very thankful that she didn't abort me and that she actually gave me life. And I had to forgive my father, who was abusive. I prayed for him. I had asked God to show himself to him. And 2 weeks before my father passed away, he too received Jesus. I learned to let things go because I'm not going to be subject to the bondage of unforgiveness, because that's worse than being in prison with drugs or anything else. Unforgiveness is probably an addiction in itself, and I didn't want that anymore. So I learned to forgive in all different ways. Just forget it, let it go. But I use my past. I'm very open, very transparent. I'll tell you everything, my flaws, my brokenness, my cracks, my scars. But all of this makes me who I am today. Every morning when I get up, I tell the Lord that I am going to move mountains today, that today is the day I am going to tell somebody about you. That's my life now. I get up and I'm a warrior, and I'm going to kick Satan's butt. And some days it's hard, but every day I keep going, and I don't let anything keep me down.
That's what is so incredible. Because you just kept going and persevering through the journey to overcome. You led us into, you married a cowboy. So tell us who this cowboy is and how he has become your biggest male cheerleader for you.
He is amazing. We will be married 23 years this year. He is my best friend. He rides horses. He works cattle. He's the pastor of the church that we have created here outside of Dallas. We have actually founded a cowboy church. We've been in ministry for 22 years. I travel all over the United States. I speak in prisons. I go to shelters. I do country clubs, women's conferences. Wherever God wants me to go, I want to go. I want to speak his name. But my husband has been my biggest cheerleader. He believes in me. He knows every flaw about me, everything that's happened in my life. We talk. He is the best friend that I've never had. He is the one that tells me that God is for me and not against me. He reads scriptures over me. He says, Paula, for such a time as this, you have been created. You go tell, you go do what God's telling you to do, and I'm here and I will support you and stand with you. And to have somebody like that in your life is so important, because we need people that believes in us and believes the call that God has on our lives. And he is that guy.
So you have 3 books that are out.
The first one that I wrote is called Choices, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's a smaller book, but it took me the longest to write because it was my testimony. And sometimes when we start writing out our testimony, it's pretty tough. It's pretty hard to write everything down. The second book that I wrote, called To Experience His Presence, we go through God's Word and we look at David and how David wasn't perfect, but he was a man after God's own heart. These are the steps that I took to experience God in my life. We can read his word, we can go to church, but if you never really experience his presence, then you've not gone deep enough. And that's what that book is all about. My last book that I wrote is called Come to the Waters and Thirst No More, the restoration story. This is a story about an old house that has to be restored. And that's us. We give our lives to Jesus. He restores us. Sometimes he has to tear up things, take things out, replace things, but it is about the restoration of our lives. They can get these books online at my website. It's paulaabottministries.com.
If they want to come to your church, where do they go?
We are in a little town called Terrell, Texas. We're 20 miles east of Dallas, and it's called Round Pen Cowboy Church. And we named our church after the round pen, where the cowboy will take the wild horse into a round pen and they will train them for the purpose that they have in their life. That's where the horse learns to submit to the master. That's where the horse learns to hear the master's voice. And that's where the horse learns to have the purpose that God intended for him to have. It's a training of a lifetime. We train disciples. We train people to go out and to do their purpose in life.